Started then.
Good morning, Commissioners. Andrew Howell, Shawnee County Election Commissioner.
Morning.
So, nothing has really changed, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this page. I think most of you know our mission statement. We do have a record number of registered voters, so we do have a lot more people to communicate with than we've had in the past. 115,000 is kind of a record high for us. A lot of registration been going on for a while, and it's starting to show in the numbers. Small changes in the districts as a result of redistricting this year. No major changes that truly affect us in a big way, but we have a few less state representatives and we have a few more state board of education. So just some minor changes just to be aware of. Some new state laws enacted in 21 and 22, pretty significant changes. Quite frankly, we haven't got final guidance from the Secretary of State on a lot of those. So I've kind of outlined some of those here for you just to give you a feel for what those issues are. Like I said, a lot of this we have not requested additional funding because I don't feel like I have the information yet. We're still waiting on a lot of final guidance from the Secretary of State. Some of these will end up being very significant, some will not be significant at all, and it's kind of hard for us to tell until we get that, what that's going to look like. So our advanced ballot return envelopes, they need to be redesigned, but the Secretary of State has not yet given us final guidance, so we're going to make it through this year okay, but next year may be a little interesting. I don't know yet. Just a reminder, it's now illegal for the election office to accept outside funding from other groups. It has to either come from the state or the county only. There is no state funding at this time to mitigate any of those costs, so I guess we could all say together that pretty much means the county gets to pay the bills on elections. There is something that will take some time and effort that's passed this year, and we're working on it currently, but there is an affidavit system required on all ballot transfers that are occurring within an election. So we're working on that. Again, we're still waiting on final guidance on that. There is a biennial elections audit, which is a new requirement for elections. It's going to take additional staff time. Watermarks will be required on ballots in 24. So I'm just putting that in there just to kind of let you know. We don't know what that's going to look like, what kind of cost drivers that may or may not include, just to be aware of it for 24 budget purposes. I don't expect it to impact us directly for 23 because, like I said, that statute enacting, I think, enacts or is effective in 24. And then we're also now required to have individual canvas abstracts available, and those are actually the little tapes that print out of the out of each of the individual machines. So it's going to take a little bit of effort. Again, probably not a big cost driver, but just something to be aware of. Additionally, at the end of the year, I think we're going to need to change some precincts. Redistricting created some new issues and headaches for us. So I think we're not asking for new funding for that, just something to be aware of. I don't think it'll be a major cost driver. One of our goals is to maintain established service levels. I've given you, as you can see, kind of the unpredictable levels of early voting in the office in odd years. It really is driven by the candidates and the number of candidates that file. We really have no control or way of projecting accurately. There's just no way to predict. It takes 4 candidates to cause the primary, and there's just no way for us to predict who's going to file. So we've tried to put what we think are some decent estimates for both the primary costs and the general costs for early voting. But like you can see, the numbers are just all over the place, especially in the primary. I do expect this type of growth to continue. It's high demand. I think we do a good job of getting voters in and out on our early voting in the office. And it's kind of interesting to me that our early primary numbers in recent years have been higher even than our general election numbers. And again, I think that's driven by just the number of candidates and where they file and how active they are in their campaigns. Same thing with advanced ballots. For odd years, they're kind of all over the map. We're projecting about 6,000 in 2023. They bounce around a lot again. It's driven more by candidates and their campaigns and how aggressively they help people with their mail ballot requests. Provisionals, I think are going to be up slightly due to redistricting. I think there's going to be a little bit of voter confusion. I won't spend a lot of time going through the numbers. I think we do a good job. More provisionals count in Shawnee County typically than don't. So I think we do a good job of making sure that people get the help and the consideration they need. And then finally, cost of all ballots and a lot of the processes around mail ballots, envelopes are rising. In fact, last year we ordered our paper, and we're glad we did. We think it was a smart move very, very early. There continue to be concerns about the supply chain. Our vendors are actually telling us that paper costs are rising about 10%, ballot costs are rising about 10%, 8 to 10% every quarter. I have not put those kinds of increases in the budget. We're hoping that slows down and that maybe our existing contract, if we can convince our current contract to stay in place, again, I think that's going to get trickier, but we're going to try for another year and see if we can get there. And we're going to order early on paper as well. Again, I think that's smart due to supply chain question marks and just the increased cost that just seems to be going on pretty consistently there. Our average cost per ballot goes up on the mail side as well as on the paper side. And one of the newer issues that we've seen is we had some trouble this year getting our advance envelopes because they have to be cut and they have to be put together, and that takes 2 or 3 different vendors. So then you start compounding personnel issues with suppliers and vendors. It can get a little tricky. Again, we have not done a major increase in our budget. This is more just FYI. We think it could be significant. We continue to take voter feedback, which I think has been very good in the last few years. We talk about our processes. I get out there and spend a lot of time talking in the community about misinformation, about making sure people know there is a paper ballot for every voter, that we have Democrats and Republicans involved in every process that we do, and I'm actively encouraging people across the community to be election workers, because I think the best way to mitigate or to make sure people understand how it works is to encourage them to either attend a public event or to come be an election worker, so they can see for themselves that the system has a lot of checks and balances, and there are ways to verify how it's done. We are still sticking to our standard in the county of trying to process voters in 15 minutes. We think that's a good number. It's worked well for us. National standard is never more than 30 minutes. That was back in, I think, a little after 2008, Obama put together a national conversation on that issue. And the result of that conversation was that you should have voters waiting never more than 30 minutes. Like I said, we're trying to make it 15, and I think most of the time we're able to attain that. Professional development, we've actually had 2 people who've completed the CERA program, and I would put those 2 staff members up against anybody in the state with their knowledge and their ability to execute and their ability to do all the things that need to be done. They're both very good. So I'm encouraging other people. We currently have 4 other staff members who are in that certification system to enhance professionalism. I also think it's important that we maintain our knowledge, not only of best practices generally, but also in the area of election security. So we're continuing to encourage people to attend and to get training both in and out of state to the extent possible and to the extent that our budget will handle that. Finally, let's talk for just a second about significant changes in this budget request, so you kind of know, what we think is a significant difference from what you're used to seeing. We have put additional funding in here to replace ASAME with an established vendor product. We've had an ongoing conversation with IT about the need to replace our ASAME election management system. We think a national vendor product will better address the needs and all of the changes that are occurring in elections and in that space. I think that new approach should free IT and development staff up to better focus on other county priorities. At least that's kind of the conversation that we've had so far. It's certainly up to you to determine, if you want to proceed with that. Additionally, we've put $50,000 in a building maintenance fund, as none currently exists. As you know, we've had some facility issues with roofing, guttering, pavement, and a few other things that are recently kind of come to the forefront and are currently in play. So just to be aware of that. And then finally, we have put an increase in election worker wages. That has not been changed since 2010, and we're hearing about it a lot. And we're having trouble, frankly, recruiting people. At the $7.25 an hour, it is difficult. So we've raised that to $8 with some additional out-year increases over time to be considered, hopefully in the future as well. And again, our USPS rates seem to be increasing by 5 to 7% a year. Again, I did not put any increase in the budget for that, but just that's kind of the history that we've seen. So those, I think, are the big changes and the big differences in the budget request, just so you're aware of those. And if you've got questions on those, Jake is ready to dig deep in some of those, because he's kind of been the deep dive on some of those three things, or anything else you've got questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
Okay, so the legislature has required us to redesign and reorder advanced ballot return envelopes. They've also told us that we can't take funding from any outside source. We now have to watermark ballots. We have an audit that we have to do every other year now. An affidavit system. And now all individual canvas abstracts have to be available for review by a poll agent upon request. So, and they provided us no funding at all for any of that.
That's what it looks like to me so far, yeah. As you know, elections and election bills are kind of a hot topic in the legislature, and there's been a number of those that seem to come through every year.
I mean, it's getting a little ridiculous. Plus, stamps, paper, everything went up. Gas prices.
True.
And the taxpayers of Shawnee County are responsible for the tab on that.
Yeah, elections is kind of one of those things that in statute, the county is clearly mandated to pay for. And, we can build a budget, but at the end of the day, no matter what, we do at the county level have to fund that. And I would add, in odd years, and I didn't really talk about this, kind of like we saw this year, we actually had an unscheduled election for a mail ballot for a school district, and we can recover, I estimate 85 to 90% of that, but you'd never recover it all. Because what typically happens when you have those, and we wouldn't be surprised to see one next year. We've heard a little bit of noise that there's some consideration going on. So those are kind of another one of those levels of things that happen that the legislature's funding schemes allow you to recover a lot of it, but not all of it.
And that is not changing? They're still going to allow you to recover from school boards and those special
We can
elections?
recover, like I said, most of it, but not all of it, yes.
All right.
So that's not considered funding?
No, it's a cost recovery program, and it's
Okay.
not
Just
100%.
wanna
Like,
make
you
sure.
can't get back the staff time
Okay.
that was spent, and you really can't charge for it. So that's part of the requirement of the
Can we
law.
charge the state for their legislative elections every 2 years?
I'm sure an invoice could be sent. I'm not sure if it would be, I'm not sure if it would
We're
be
gonna have to print a
paid.
lot of ballots for this governor's race.
What are other counties doing as far as their poll workers? I mean, are we seeing that Wyandotte and Johnson, Douglas, Sedgwick, what are they paying their poll workers?
Most of your larger counties are paying somewhere between 9 to 11. So I think kind of our internal goal was kind of to try to get to about $9 over the next, 2 or 3 years, something like that. Again, county commission approval, assuming we can afford it. We're trying not to project out too far and make too many assumptions on what's possible, but that's kind of, I think, where we would like to get to, at least to sort of begin to play in the space similar to other similar sized counties.
And keep in mind, their salaries are higher too than Topeka's.
Well, but
Overall,
we're paying lifeguards 10 and a quarter or 10.50. And we can barely get enough kids to be lifeguards. And you're asking somebody to come work for 12 hours. I mean, we can barely get anybody to work 12 hours for one day at a fast food restaurant, much less an election.
Yeah.
I mean, we're relying on a lot of elderly, we're relying on a lot of retired, we're relying on a lot of people to give up their time at their job, at the county, to go over there, and because they would get paid their county time, leave time,
No.
or
No,
they don't
county
need-
workers can work the election and they do not give up any of their
Okay.
time.
Yeah, they get paid.
they'll
They
get
get
paid
paid
their
their
hourly
normal.
rate, I mean, right.
They get paid their normal salary.
Do we use is there a possibility that for election workers that we could use the same cards that we use for jury pay?
There is, that company does do that, and that is one of the things that we've talked about.
We
And
have
what we
talked
wanted to
about
do
that.
was kind of make sure that get the whole system with the jury pay, give it some time for the dust to settle, make sure we'd work through all of the issues. But yes, that company does offer that service, and that's one of the things we've talked about going to in the future.
Okay.
The budget for maintenance of the building, this is new this year to build that in?
Is,
I'll let you answer that.
Yeah, Jake Fisher, Assistant Elections Commissioner. Yes, that's something that we added this year. I've been on the job now for almost a year, and that's something that we hadn't had in the budget previously. And so this was something that we had talked about, but it really came to a head, obviously, with the roof issue and guttering issue we had here back in the middle of May. And so we thought it would be best to have something in there to start addressing these things for the building, because right now, we don't have anything in our budget for the maintenance of the building. And so honestly, I picked this number based on what I thought the cost would probably be to fix the issue that we have now. And as other people have said in their budget presentations, just kind of a placeholder to be able to start this discussion. And, obviously it's up to you gentlemen to decide what we do.
So this would be more of a contingency fund then?
This would be a contingency fund, but also just a forward-going maintenance fund so that we have things that need to be repaired. For example, the entrance into our parking lot off of Croy there is in bad shape. We've got a huge pothole there that concrete really needs to be cut out and replaced. But in the past, we didn't have money in the budget to be able to address something like that. And so just as things need to be
There's
repaired.
some trees that I think you wanted to have trimmed back that were getting debris into the units.
That is correct, yeah, debris into our AC units, and also, obviously, to keep more debris from going into our guttering system as well.
I have a question. You're saying a maintenance fund. Does this mean that you're budgeting to transfer money into a separate fund, or this is just an increase in your budget to cover those?
It's an increase in our budget to cover those. We created it as a new line item in our budget. But once again, I will never claim to be an expert on our budget, and so I would just, once again, wanted to start this discussion, and that's how we came up with
And
that.
how much did you put into that?
50,000.
And then on the replacement of the Awesome E, how much money did you set aside on that?
We in there put $105,750.
And
where
that's
did you
listed
come up-
under the general fund.
And that's a CIP item, that's not a budget item.
No, it's both.
Oh,
We'd listed it
oh,
on both, and once again, it's a program we would like to be able to do. I think it would be beneficial for our office, absolutely. I think it would alleviate some of the burden and stress that's been placed on IT because of just the way elections have evolved recently. And so I put it in there in both places so that the commission could decide how they wanted to fund that, whether it was part of our budget or as a CIP.
And this is sounds like a very specific amount.
That is what the cost would be for, there's two different companies we've talked to that are both nationwide, both respected, and both could provide for us. And we put in an amount that would cover the higher of the two. We have not signed a contract with anybody, obviously, and so we're still looking at this.
So is this a purchase price, or is this an annual maintenance amount?
That is the initial price for the first year. Years 2 and 3, that amount drops to just under $49,000 a year. So it's a big lift for the first year, but going in, and we've got a guarantee on years 2 and 3 at that number of just under $49,000. And with the needs that we have, once again, I do not think it would be possible at all to find somebody with the IT skills necessary to be able to do the job for an all-in cost and salary and benefits of $49,000. So the first year's tough, years 2 and 3 are much, much easier.
So I guess it seems like this is something that probably the Secretary of State's office ought to be doing statewide. I mean, for uniformity of elections across the state, wouldn't it make more sense for them to have the contract here and provide it to all of the elections?
We're not at that point at this time, Commissioners, all I can say. I can't speak for the Secretary of State and.
Well, I know you can't, but are there others, are there other counties that are doing this same thing? I mean,
The large counties, yes.
okay.
But obviously none of the smaller counties that I'm aware of. Oh, okay.
Typically, it'll be larger counties that have complexity.
3 years from now, you're looking at about $3 million in equipment.
Yes, that's correct. That was part of our CIP for our technology replacement plan, yes.
And so you've gone through and done an audit of the equipment you've got, and everything seems like it's gonna last for, I mean, obviously, contingencies may happen, emergencies may happen.
Right.
But on this time, it looks like everything's set to work for at least the next couple of years, but looking at a major expenditure about 3 years out.
That is correct, Commissioner. Yes, we've worked with the supplier of that equipment, and that's the lifetime that they have given us, and so that's what we have plugged in. Now, at the same time, you know, is there a chance you could try to stretch it an extra year? Of course there is, but at that point, there's always the fear that at some point you could have major failures.
But we're
Yes.
not looking at, like we have had in the past, with batteries that are failing or equipment that's becoming unable to be updated. But everything else looks like it's on track for right now.
Yes, as I stand here today, yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I know that was a big thing, was going through and auditing everything that we've got out at the elections office.
Right.
Commissioner, just clarifying on the technology replacement CIP item. They did have some other items in other off years, but all of those were under $50,000. So those would fall under the small item CIP.
Okay.
And then also I wanted to clarify the election management system. It qualifies as a CIP, so that's why it's on your lists. But it was designated to be paid out of their own general fund. So it's just there because it's a CIP.
But it got put on both places.
It is a CIP.
But if it's granted as a CIP, then it wouldn't be,
Then it would come off of their budget.
it would come off their budget.
Correct.
Yes. You as the commission
One
could
or the-
decide
one or
which-
the other.
where you wanted it to pay.
That's, in the past, we've had general fund items included in our CIP.
Right, but
So-
the commission could change it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So just because it's on CIP doesn't mean it's capital outlay funded. So people get the CIP
Yes.
phrasing confused.
As opposed to the elections equipment, which is the second item, the replacement, which is capital outlay.
Correct.
I have one other question too.
Commissioner Rippon's.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all
I'm
right.
sorry.
It's
I
okay.
didn't see.
Was it last year we replaced a number of the poll books, the electronic? poll
Yes, the
books?
EPBs,
Are we
yes.
all set there now? We're in good shape and?
Yeah, but
I think we're in pretty good shape overall. I would say, I do think there's gonna be a couple of minor things that we will need. As that's a fairly new system, I do think there's $3,000 or $4,000 worth of things that we may need that I'm starting to hear about. But again, part of what we're trying to do with this is do a better job of communicating with commissioners and Betty about what we think is going to occur. And we're gonna try to update that every 6 months, so I may be updating that within the next few months with $4,000 or $5,000 worth of things that I think we need, but I need to talk to IT about it, Betty about it, you guys about it. So there's a little bit hanging out there, but not much. If that answers your question.
if I may, Commissioner Rippon, also, we have that down for 2026. So those poll books that we bought, they had a 5-year lifespan. And so we're good for the next several years on those.
Okay. I did have one other question. On this biannual elections audit, you said is a new requirement. Who does that audit?
The election office has to administer it. Secretary of State's office kind of sets up the parameters and the details, and it's in addition to the existing audit law that we're already doing. And it also includes, I believe, a requirement that if the race is 1% or closer, that we're required to do, I believe, an audit as well. So there's some new pieces to that. I haven't spent a lot of time on it yet. studying it exactly, but I know there's some additional requirements that we'll get some further guidance on soon.
But it's an internal audit, it's not a third party
Correct.
that has to come in and perform it?
Correct.
It's an
And I think the
internal.
Secretary of State's office may be required under this to do a little bit more oversight, but it's not going to be a major CPA aggressive. I don't think it'll require a lot of external, but it does require extra people and time on our part to accomplish.
The Verizon MiFi's, looks like the cost on here, like last year it was $29.72. This year you're asking for $7,200. The price on those jumped that much, or?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
The cost last year was covered by federal money, and so this year it is not.
Okay.
And what we've done is we've really worked to cut down the time that those units are on. So we had, for example, we had 10 of them turned on already, just to check for updates, and for the work that we're doing now, the rest of those units will come on very close to election time, just to try to cut down, to save as much as we can on that.
Okay.
And that's actually part of IT's approved vendor. I think it's the best deal that we can get. So it's real money, it's significant, but it's a current contract that IT has, and I think it's the best deal we can get on those.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Of course, we're established under statute. Most everything I do in my office is a statutory requirement. But if you, especially under KSA 19-301 et sec. But if you look through the statute books, we kind of put a little bit of a county clerk jobs in every one of those statutes. I'm here all the time. I'm the keeper of our seal. I'm the one who has to set the tax levies. Preparing, certifying the tax roll, all the normal things. But there's also, the additional, like the real estate. When the deeds are filed in the Register of Deeds, they come to my office, and then we're responsible for making sure that the name changes get done, so that the tax statements go to the correct property. And of course, the weed department comes to you once a year and has a list of uncollected. They go out and spray weeds on somebody's property, and they send them an invoice, they don't pay it, and they come to you and will have you certify that that list needs to be collected. Then they turn it over to the Register of Deeds and to me, and I put it on a special assessment on their property, a special tax, weed tax for collection. But there's one, I don't think none of you were on the board at the time, but there's one that keeps me up at night, and that's 19804A KSA. It says, when there's no sheriff in an organized county, it shall be the duty of the county clerk to exercise all the powers and duties of the sheriff in his county until the sheriff be elected or qualified. Now, this happened one time in Shawnee County in a modified version. That's once too many. I would much rather stay with my normal day-to-day duties, which we have now, the swearing in elected officials and boards and auditing the budgets of non-school budgets, receiving applications for economic development, and other duties that we do on a normal basis. Now, let's talk a little bit about this notice that's up here. In less than a month, we will be sending out the revenue neutral rate notices to each individual taxpayer in the county. We know what the forms look like. We have the software updated with CIC to enter the data. We have a contract with the mailing service to send out the notices. What could go wrong, right? Well, one thing that has never been addressed in the statute is, or anywhere else that I know of, is what do we do if the notices come back? Not if, when they come back. The statute says, and I quote, "The county clerk shall notify each taxpayer with property in the tax and subdivision by mail directed to the taxpayer's last known address. Alternatively, the county clerk may transmit the notice to the taxpayer by electronic means if such taxpayer and county clerk have consented in writing to service by electronic means." Nothing too difficult about that. There's another section of the statute that says if any governing body, and I think that's you, not me, does not comply with the provisions of subsection B, which is the whole part of that statute that says how the mailings should have to be done, the taxpayer will be refunded any property taxes overcollected based on the amount of levy that was in excess of the revenue neutral rate. So still, no language in there, what happens if these notices go to the wrong address? If somebody has, purchased, there's nothing in there that addresses that. Something we have to wait and see. And the 2022 legislature made a few changes to the existing, originally was Senate Bill 13. The ability for us to combine all this into one notice, all of the taxing entities, you can see they're listed on this notice, into one notice is wonderful, as opposed to sending one out for every one of them. So like in tax unit 1 here in the city, you got the city of Topeka, the county, the library, MTA, MTAA, Washburn University, and 501. And this tells you what this looks like. Now,
But, Ms. Beck, I'm sorry.
oh,
We send notices out on a regular basis through the treasurer's office,
through the appraiser's office.
through the appraiser's office. We are required, if you own property, if I sell my property to Commissioner Mays, he's required to file that with the Register of Deeds, which would put the world on notice as to who the owner of the property is. So, but if he fails to do it, it's still going to list me, but it was his responsibility to file that with the Register of Deeds. So the only way that somebody would not get the notice is if they have failed to follow their step to make sure the property is there. But the treasurer's office is sending out treasurer's notices, the appraiser is sending out appraiser's notices.
And they still come, everybody gets, we get those
Get
white,
bins. We get 9, 10 bins full of returned mail.
But why
For
would that,
taxing.
why would that then burden be on the Shawnee County to refund if we have taken every mean necessary to follow who's the registered owner?
well, and of course, there is a cutoff date. If we mail them, which we have to mail them by August 1st, well, we're gonna mail them out by August 1st. We give us extra time. So if somebody bought property on July 30th, and these, it may not have gotten into this, there's a possibility that in the, crosshairs there. You're an attorney. You explain to me I don't know what happens if the statute doesn't cover it. I really don't. We've asked the question of the state, the municipal accounts and the other clerks across the state. And they don't even respond. They just kind of like, well, I don't know. I'm really worried about it because we have so many that will come back. And it doesn't say if they come back, if this thing comes back, then you have an opportunity to go through and resend them. Well, there won't be 10 days notice to these people. I won't be following the notification for the hearings. And I don't know. Will they come back? Are there groups out there that will jump all over us if we have, because all it takes is one person in the state of Kansas who said, I did not receive it. They go to their county clerk's office and they find that notice that had come back in the mail for whatever reason. You know what? There's a half a dozen million reasons why a mailing will come back. I mean, it can be anything. It can be that the there's two of them stuck together and your notice went to Commissioner Mays for some reason. There's lots of reasons. But all it takes is one person in this state, not necessarily even our county, but one person in this state to not get it. And there'll be those who'll jump on top of it and say, they're not doing their job. But these are the items, and they are.
The amount that they would be due would only be the amount of over the revenue neutral rate.
Of each of the entities in their, like so in.
But you will have had to have paid your taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't get a refund of something you haven't paid.
No, but they would have had to pay their taxes and then get refunded, and then they have to. I'm sure we'll leave that up to Larry to calculate what the refunds would be, but these are the items. These are the items that have to be included, and you see the notice isn't exactly as clear as it can be. A, the revenue neutral rate relevant to the taxpayer's property. B, the proposed property tax revenue needed to refund the proposed budget, to fund the proposed budget for each taxing subdivision if the taxing subdivision notified the county clerk of its proposed intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. C, the proposed tax rate based on the proposed budget and the current year's total assessed valuation of the taxing subdivision if the taxing subdivision notified the county clerk of its proposed intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. D, the percentage by which the proposed tax rate exceeds the revenue neutral rate. E, the tax rate and property tax of each taxing subdivision from the previous year's tax statement. F, the appraised value and assessed value of the taxpayer's property for the current year. G, the estimates of the tax for the current year on the taxpayer's property based on the revenue neutral rate of each taxing subdivision and any proposed tax rates that exceed the revenue neutral rate. H, the difference between the estimates of tax based on the proposed tax rate and the revenue neutral rate on the taxpayer's property described in the previous item for any taxing subdivision that has a proposed tax rate that exceeds the revenue neutral rate. And I, the date, time, and location of the public hearing of the taxing subdivision if the taxing subdivision notified the county clerk of its proposed intent to exceed the revenue neutral rate. There's not much. I mean, that's why the thing looks like. It's not totally confusing, but Larry and I both have concerns that it doesn't make a difference. Larry still has people that are going to look at that and they're going to find a tax amount on there and they're going to want to pay it. So he's going to. I mean, it says in lots and lots of places on there. I mean, it's very evident it's not a tax statement. But some people, when they get something from the county, doesn't make sure the difference comes from my office or Larry's. They're still going to want. They're going to have. So my office is going to get inundated with phone calls when these go out. Larry's office is going to get inundated with phone calls when these go out. Steve's office. I mean, it's just any time, whether it's when the appraiser sends out notices for value changes, when the treasurer sends out notices for first half, second half. When anything that goes out, all three of our offices get the calls. And we found out with the initial information on the notices, the ad valorem tax extends to personal property. So we kind of thought we would, the tax, the cost of this mailing and postage and everything would be about 43,000, based on what Larry had told. Of course, just got through having a postage increase as of the 10th, went up to 60 cents, so I'm sure we get a break, but the break is going to be not as good as it was before, so that will go up a little bit. So we're now looking at possibly 50,000, give or take, because we have both the real estate and the personal property, and they can't be put on the same notice. I mean, we can put all the notices on there, but the personal property and real estate will be two separate. So if you have two things, it will be separate. Good thing is, for 23 and 24, and we know it's in the budget for for the state for 23, they will reimburse us for the mailing and the postage for those 2 years. They won't reimburse us for, I had to have the extra employee, that I put in, or I had the position that I was going to not fill, and ended up having to fill it because of all of the calls and the extra work that's going to be to work the ones that are big, the notices and stuff that will be coming back. After 24, then what we do is, before December 31st, we have to take the breakdown of the postage and the mailing expense and divide it up amongst all of the, there's 50 altogether taxing entities in Shawnee County. And each of them gets their percentage of what I guess we're going to break it down probably by value. It's the easiest way to do it, and do a percentage. So each of them will get billed before December 31st. So that'll be another thing coming up that will have to be done. So before I move on, do you have any questions about this? I mean, it's
Yeah.
a known.
So people that own multiple properties, I mean, we have landlords out there that own 100 different properties in Shawnee County.
Mm-hmm.
Will they get one envelope, or will they get 100 different envelopes?
Larry, the company that we're working with, Larry is more familiar with, but they will, hang on, Larry? Would you explain to
It
what?
has the ability to consolidate if they see duplicates. They will make their best effort attempt to consolidate. We have that where they have multiple properties. If they can see that, they'll put it all in one envelope, save us the postage.
Okay.
So that would be because it's the same company, it's just a different, instead of a tax statement, they're sending out these. So yes, the answer is yes,
Okay.
they will, and to the best of their, like I said, ability. But if you have a company that's the same company, but one is ABC Real Estate, and the next one is ABE Real Estate, but they're the same company, they won't know that. I mean, so they'll be.
Right. Okay.
But,
Well,
yeah.
that's good at least.
Yeah, and we have a call this afternoon at 2:00, Lori and I do, with what's her first name? From IT?
So Diane, also just-
No, it's from IT, Roberts.
Oh,
Rebecca Roberts from IT will be on the call with us. We'll, kind of set, get familiar with what is going to have to be, done with this. And of course, the Treasurer's Office has been great. Tammy took the lead on with getting this contract renewed, and because it had been a few years since they'd had the mailing service. So we've got, there's been a lot of work together with everybody, and so we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed. And then just a few things. My accounts payable division is, they're still busy getting the ACHs processed. We're almost half of our vendors now have ACH, and that's not counting the employees. So we have a requirement that if I travel someplace and I have some mileage reimbursement, I don't get a check anymore. I have an ACH. So so all of our employees are just automatically put onto the ACH. We make them do that. But it works out very well because it's a great time saver for the staff. It's all the way through. We do a good job of keeping track, and somebody very seldom do we have something bounce back because somebody had the wrong checking account. So it's just working out quite well. And then in my administrative area, we have besides taking care of the minutes and the processing the resolutions and the contracts and such, a big piece of their work is the Kansas Open Records Act. And last year, we had 131 open records that came just to my office. Because they do go to, the sheriff will get some of the elections. Each department gets their own, they don't all send them to me, even though I am the Freedom of Information Officer. They're gonna get them eventually, and I'm just hoping that they follow the 3-day notices and such like, but we have, it's just, they're increasing. We've already, many of the counties, or most of the counties across the state have already gotten their open records requests from Kansas Policy Institute, asking for this information. You can't ask for information into the future. I mean, you can't, this doesn't have to be done until July 20th. The notices don't have to come to the individual clerks until July 20th, so this information won't be ready until the 21st, but many of them have received their request already for, in preparation. So we'll just hang in and wait, because there will be a lot of them. My department has the real estate, administrative, and accounts payable. I have 10 employees, 5 union and 5 classified. And we are constantly scanning and scanning. We have, each desk in my office has a scanner for documents, so, because paper is just, in overabundance in my office, and they do a great job of trying to digitizing the records. If you've asked for a contract or anything from my administrative area, most times you got seconds, maybe a minute or so, and it'll be back to you, because we have those, after every meeting, so we go this way and this way. They're automatically, or they're there, and Chris and Stephanie are great about pulling those up fast. Just a quick overview of my budget this year for '23 is $984,088. $953,131 are the wages and benefits. $13,782 is the amount I had to add into my employee retirement fund. And I hired 2 employees who were already, she thinks this is funny. I hired 2, and they're wonderful employees, don't get me wrong, but both of them were already retirement eligible. So, usually when you hire someone, because they were already in the county. So Jennifer got quite a joke about that. It's like, well, they're great employees, but they're retirement eligible. My contractual services and my supplies in the amount of $9,700 and $7,200 respectively, there's no change to those at all, and the licenses and sales tax that we have to pay, and that stays at $275. So all in all, that's where it is, where we stand. And I want to thank you for all the efforts you have made to prioritize our county employees through the great benefits and allowing them to receive a competitive wage through our recent wage study. That is very, very, very much appreciated. My staff and I will continue to offer our excellent customer service. We'll continue to make sure every interaction we have with the residents of Shawnee County, whether in person, over the phone, or by email, is as informative and helpful as possible. We do the best we can for the people of Shawnee County. That's it. Any questions?
This notice, I'm gonna go back to it for just
That's
a
okay.
second. It can be done by email if you had people email address?
Well, it isn't just like Mr. Rippon has given me his email. I have to have it in writing from you that you're allowing me to use your email.
I was just wondering if there's any way of harvesting a lot of emails from people where, I don't know.
And there again, too,
Now,
yeah.
wouldn't you presume that Johnson County, which has a much higher taxing base than Shawnee County, if there's a lawsuits to be filed, it's gonna happen there first?
Well, but like I said, all it takes is one person. It could happen in Gold County. It could happen in Seward. I mean, it doesn't say how big the county has to be. One person, and some of the counties are being inundated by, there's a small group in some of the western and south central counties that there's a small group of people that are going about with the election stuff, and then they're tagging onto this, so it might not be Johnson County or Sedgwick or Shawnee. It might be one of the smaller ones, but it'll just, once that stone hits the water, it's gonna affect all of us. But as an attorney, what do you think? If they're silent on the issue, what do we do? I mean, if it says we have to, and then they came back, but there's no allowance for them coming back, what do we do?
As an attorney, I'm gonna look at the amount that you're really talking about, and you're realistically talking about over the revenue neutral rate, $400 or $500. Now, for your average citizen, if you are a business manufacturer, it might be $4,000 or $5,000. And so if I was really looking at it, and as an attorney, I'm gonna find the right person, I'm gonna find the right case.
Yes.
I'm gonna be looking for that person who's gonna make it worth the time and energy to go after. But then again, there are individuals out there, institutes that reside in Johnson County, that may want to make this more of a measure just to, again, make a social commentary.
Right. Well, just the fact that we went from, I think they added 3 additional items to the list before we even actually got to this notice, because last year it was, all they had to do was publish it, publish it in the paper and/or on their website if they had one, and that was what the revenue neutral rate was, what your proposed rate's going to be if you're going over, and what your notification of time, place, and location of the our time, date, and location of the meeting, and it went to that. I don't know. I'm hoping that maybe someone will address it in the next legislative session, and address the fact that they don't have an allowance for what happens to the ones that come back. But it'll be interesting. We're doing the best we can, and it's going to be a. We aren't going to be stuffing envelopes of stuff, of course,
Well,
thankfully to the mailing service.
we have
but
75,000 parcels of land in Shawnee County.
Mhm.
You can start delivering them all by hand.
And then how many,
The exempt won't be, they won't generate one for exempt.
right.
property.
But also, how many personal property items did we have?
It said 98,000 on the listing we got. But that included watercraft, which we already
Right.
sent to.
But it's a 90, so maybe another 60,000 personal property items. Don't know if they are, there again too, if it's a company that has 10,000 of them, I don't know.
If they're owners of real estate, they maybe can be in the personal, the real estate can be put together.
Do they send personal and real estate together in tax statements? No, so that's why I said I don't know. But Betty's just gonna be the one she's gonna go, this is a lot more than what you told me it was gonna be from this mailing. And, next year it'll be easier, because we can look back on this year and go, oh, we were either right on, or we were a little bit not, so.
I'm just curious, and I don't know whether to ask you or Larry, but, so on all of those items that you're saying that we do get as returns, is there somewhere in CIC that we flag that the address is bad, so that we know next time they come to make a payment, we can refresh that?
We don't, well, no. Yeah, see.
We don't use anything like that at CIC.
Okay.
Because we have 3 entities that could actually change an address.
Mhm.
Right.
We default to just the clerk's office.
Yeah.
to change their address.
Okay.
Crisscrossing.
Yeah, well, I mean, when we get these pallets or boxes or whatever, the mailing boxes, those white ones, let's say, just say from the real estate tax statements or tax statement mailings, when they start coming down to my office, the real estate people in my office, they start pulling them out and checking to see, and, you know, they can, and we have some that are people who own the distant owners, the absentee owners. Those are always gonna come back. You know, they have an address in Sun City, Arizona, or someplace like that. You know, it's a bad address, and doesn't make any how many times we send it out, it's gonna be bad address. But they work on them, and if there was a crossover on somebody, like, you know, you sold property and bought property, we find out that there's a new owner or a new address, then we quickly turn around and resend that notice. But,
We do correspond with the appraiser as well.
Mhm,
We do get an address, we send an email out to them, or we send the envelopes with the new address on it, so that they can change their Ryan inside for their mailings that they do.
yeah, we three departments work really close because of obviously, the cost of mailings, the cost of the paper, and everything else that goes out. So we try to keep as up-to-date on our addresses as possible, but, you know, that's a perfect world.
Cindy, are you keeping track of the amount of money that we put into this and whether we're paying for it or the state's paying for it?
Right, but I'd love to be able to track our hours, but it doesn't do any good because they're not gonna reimburse us for hours anyway. It's just.
No, but I think it might be good to keep track of it anyways, so that we can illustrate to them why it's important that they fund this, because, I mean, again, if we're spending if we're hiring extra people, if we're spending extra hours, I think we need, for our records, if nothing else, to understand, you know, the weight of this and how much extra we're gonna be spending just because of this piece here. The other thing on here is, I noticed that on this sample, and I realize it's just a sample, but Washburn Rural's on there 3 times.
That's because they have,
They break the tax
Yeah,
out
they-
out, and I think one
Okay.
was paid in
Yeah.
general.
they have to, we have to,
So,
has to be for each one of them.
The interesting thing with that, though, is that you can't tell because it cuts off
Right.
as after the WA, so it's just Auburn Law 3 times. I mean, is there a way to change that so that it says maybe USD 437 and then capital
It's-
outlay?
it's-
Or,
The way it is, we had to go, a lot of counties are able to go with only the legal, or the letter size notices. We already had to go to a legal size, and
I don't know about the
There's-
towns as well. but
Yeah.
It's in the,
The-
it's in the CIC's thing, so I
Yeah,
don't know.
they're
Is
not-
there- Are we required to put the name of the
Yeah,
school
that's
district
what I guess-
afterwards?
That I do not know.
well, and maybe it's
I
too
don't
late
know.
at this point to even mess
well,
with it.
it still can be adjusted, but like, this is a state form, and they met with all of the software companies. You know, of course, they were involved. I was on a task force, Lori and I we were on a task force years or months ago to get this form the way it is. But it's, and we have a little bit of wiggle room in there because, you know, larger counties have, sometimes we have more individual taxing entities, but there's, I don't know, I know if we just put 437, USD 437, everybody's gonna know what it is. I mean, if you own property and you're living whatever tax, you know, you're gonna know what that means.
Right.
So we could look at doing that, we could talk to them, because it would just be a matter of CIC going in and adjusting it.
I
So-
just wonder if that's gonna cause more phone calls.
Anything that's, even if it stops one phone call.
Larry?
To address your question, the information that they're printing comes right out of the CIC database. In order to change that, you would either have to go in on a separate database and make those changes, which would be difficult. Otherwise, you would be changing your tax statements as well, because they're all tied together. It's the same database. So that's the problem, is it's that way for tax purposes, and that's the way it prints out, if she needs to identify that separately, then she would have to massage that, which is gonna be rather costly and confusing as well, so.
And we're limited, on what we can do on a lot of this stuff just because of the, well, if you know, Lori was gonna go in and put in, some fake information. As she got in, she put in the fire district.
Well, I got fire two in there, and it's the right information for them, but I couldn't go to the next steps that it did to create the rest of the information out there without.
She said, I just didn't know what I, well,
Everybody else's
yeah.
information, but I didn't know how I'd be able to go back to the create. the right.
Yeah, we did, you know, back and then have something wrong on that. So it was, we gave you as much, that's why there's all this blank information on there,
I
but.
was trying to show down below how the hearing was gonna show on there, and that's why.
Well, and that, even just give me what you're gonna give Betty here. This is, something that, and well, Betty has to have this for her, anyway, for the revenue neutral rate. I want to see that she gets this eventually. When the notice for the county, it isn't going to just, it can't just be the county general. We have to have the county general, then have the special liability. We have to have, every one of those has to have a separate notification on the intent that you will be, is it on Thursdays?
It is, but we didn't separate out the special
That's
liability.
okay, you can on this.
You can all you have to do is on this. What you're
Resolution's
doing
fine.
on the resolution is fine.
Okay.
That's perfectly fine. But this is the form that has, state mandated form that has to come to me. But we're now,
Except the state originally did it, tell us it
Yeah.
had to be broken out, even gave us the thing for a total. Well, as I'm going into the system, it's making me have to put a dollar amount for each.
each one of them, it's,
What was the,
and that, if you could give that just to Betty, Commissioner, that would be for her.
It's the same thing you had here, but I added.
Campaign,
Dave Trevor,
campaign talking points.
Dave Trevor.
You can have that to Betty, yeah. Okay.
Okay, I
Thank
know
you very
you have
much.
somewhere to be, you're out of time.
I do.
so-
I can't leave until we have, at 2:00 this afternoon, we have our meeting with the lady from the mailing service. And so then I head out sometime this afternoon, but it's
Maybe you could
it's
zoom
daylight
into that.
savings time. It'll be fine. Does anybody know is going west on 70, have they got, is it still partially closed or?
I don't
I'm
think
debating
so.
which route I'm gonna go. It had been,
Uh,
that's my route.
I would stay off the Polk Quincy Viaduct if you can.
Yeah.
And I said, and.
And
Get on at
4,
First
20
Street heading west, but
Thank you.
okay.
Okay. Again, Larry Ma, Shawnee County Treasurer. I've submitted a formal budget of $692,809. This budget is a flat budget which has been adjusted for the wage increases as well as $8,819 has been added to fulfill the requirement for funding future retirement obligations. As you recall, last year, when we established the 2022 budget, we had discussion about funding retirements, and at that time, I was requesting, per the resolution around $22,000 or $23,000 to fund that retirement, and I agreed to delete that from my budget with the stipulation that we were going to review that this year. Well, that review has taken place, and the process has been adjusted. So consequently, the $8,819 represents a reduction from what it would have originally been of around $21,000. Okay, but it's still in there, and I've included that because that's part of our budgeting process. Having said that, during 2022, I've had long durations where I've not been fully staffed. And when I have hired, I've hired people with less seniority. So I'm projecting that for my 2022 budget, that I will have a savings of around $10,000 to $15,000. And if I stay on that track, what I would propose to do is to work with audit finance and to use that excess from 2022 to fulfill that retirement obligation in the future. So I would propose today to remove the $8,819, reducing my request to $683.91. And then going forward, I would hope that we would be pretty well fully funded for the first time in history in the treasurer's office. And I have a sheet here that would show that reduction. So with your concurrence, I would formally reduce my budget request to $683,991, removing that $8,000, roughly $8,000 for retirement. And other than that, I think that's pretty straightforward. Our budget's rather simple in the treasurer's office. It's everything we do, with the exception of pencils and paper, is laid out by statutory requirements. I'd be glad to stand for any questions you might have.
Questions for Larry? All right.
Okay, before I leave, I got so excited about being able to present that I didn't do what I needed to do, and that is to introduce you. I know you know Tammy Taft. Tammy is a key player, and she makes me look like a genius every day in the treasurer's office, so I always want to give her a little bit of credit. And so, Tammy Taft.
All right. Thanks for being here.
Larry, how many notices do you get back from mailed out?
We get a lot of notices back from mailed out. We also have the same problem with motor vehicle, which is much larger. You know, you're talking about tens of thousands, not tens of thousands being returned, but a lot of mail that's being returned, and it's returned for various reasons. Bad addresses. We've found a lot of cases where the address is just perfect, and the person's lived there for 20 years, and for some reason the mail comes back. So I don't know what's going on. In your discussion, we have a similar situation where if people don't receive their original bill, or they don't receive the second notice, they always want to dispute the interest that we start charging from day one, because they didn't receive the bill. We have always relied, and it's worked for us for as long as I've been around, for almost 10 years, that people have an obligation to pay their taxes, and they know when the taxes are due. And so while we make our best attempt, and the statute says we have to send those notices out, we've always stood on the principle that we can't control all of the factors of mail and people changing addresses. Therefore, we do not forgive interest just because you did not receive your notice. And we've always stood on that principle, and it's held up for the treasurers. I would think in Cindy Beck's situation that as long as she makes good faith effort to make that notice, and in particular if she does it in a public way like in the newspaper, that it's highly unlikely that we would be refunding. Now, I'm not an attorney. I never understand our legal system and how it works, but I would think based on my experience with interest in that it would hold up as long as we do our best to make that notification.
I would tend to agree.
So if people are paying their taxes on the website through the ICANN or whatever that's called, do they get an email notification in addition to the paper? So, I mean, if maybe they've moved, but they might still have the same email address that they've paid with before, do they get a digital copy?
Yes, as part of that process, you have to give them an email address.
Okay,
And so your receipt will go to the email address.
okay.
Okay. Now, there's something that kind of happens there. If for some reason your payment doesn't go through, then Payit will make 3 attempts to run that payment. And if it still is rejected by your financial institution, they make attempts to contact you. And if you do not respond, it still does not relieve that interest, okay, that you're going to pay, because it's your responsibility to pay attention to that sort of thing. That's the principle we've always stood on, and we've never been challenged on it thus far. We confuse the issue a little bit because we will do the, for instance, on motor vehicle, we'll go ahead and send it out before we get confirmation, and then we have to, 2 months later, we're tracking back and saying it's not paid, we're pulling your tags, and we've kind of confused the people, but 99.9% of them go through. So we do not hold up everyone just in case there is a glitch. And it works.
Okay, great. Any other questions for the treasurer? Seeing none. All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, all right, let's go ahead and get started, Amanda.
All right, good morning, Commissioners. Amanda Monholland, Public Information Officer, Betty and Jennifer. I am going to be presenting all of this year's BCC Department for our budget, which will include the Communications Division as well. Here is an overview of our total request, $543,199. You can see here that we have a difference of $16,378 from the previous year of 2022. And on the next few slides, I'll go in a little bit more detail of where we are with each of our MSAs. So personnel services, we had increases of salaries all across the board from all of our employees within our department. Therefore, we did have an increase of $20,973 from the previous year for a total of $517,402. Our contractual services, we had a decrease of $3,945 from the previous year. And this is because we had requested less in our training line item within our communications department. Supplies, we had also a decrease in our request of $650 from the previous year. And this is mainly due to tools and equipment within the communications department or communications division. Because we purchased most of our communication division equipment last year. Now this year, it'll be just enough for maintenance and upkeep at this point. So that is the overview from the first slide, and the final request again is $543,199. And with that, I am happy to answer any of your guys' questions.
Questions for Amanda? All right. I was expecting a whole lot more questions.
Really?
I guess you're okay. You did a great job.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate you coming early, Becky.
Sure.
Well, Steve Bauman's here too. He can wait through with Becky's.
Mine won't be long, so if you wanted to.
All right, his is probably gonna be longer, so.
All right, I'm Becky Neosi, Register of Deeds. Thanks for taking the time to hear my budget presentation today. Our agency mission is to serve the public and preserve the records of real estate-related transactions with professionalism and courtesy to all our constituents in a fiscally responsible way. We record mainly real estate documents that helps keep the tax rolls straight, helps with business and residential development, and helps with title abstracts. We also do other documents, UCC filings, tax liens, military discharge. We have the honor to do that, and I'd like to put a plug in, let everybody know that veterans can come in anytime and record those military discharge documents, and we have those for safekeeping, can give them a certified copy at any time they should need one. And we're required by the statute to record documents immediately. That's vital for our economy and for our tax rolls, so that we do have accurate and timely recording. Since I've been in office in 2013, we've streamlined operations, staff hours, phones, processing. We've converted 2.6 million images that were only on microfilm to digital, so staff isn't running back to the microfilm every day. Staff has over 90 years of experience, so I'm very blessed. I haven't had anyone voluntarily leave since I've been there, although retirements I'm sure in the future. We added a new staff member this year. Thanks to that addition to my budget, I'm very grateful, and she's fitting in quite well and doing really helping out in the office. 2021 was our biggest year. We had 34,132 documents. We're still pretty steady, recording about 80 to 200 documents per day, probably averaging more about 120, 130. Not the boom we had in 2021. Interest rates have started going down, but sales are still there, I believe, and the market's still moving along, so we're still staying busy. When a document comes in, we examine it, index it, audit it. If it's a paper document, we have more handling to do and more time. We may reject that document, have it go back, and start that process all over again. So it's pretty time intensive and labor intensive. E-recording does help speed things along. In 2013, we were at 35%. We are now at 80% e-recording, so we don't have to handle the paper, but we still have to do all the other things, examining, indexing, auditing. And like I said, the additional staff member has really been helpful to fulfill the need for additional help in our office. And this year, I'm just asking for a flat budget, except for the normal wage increases, and thank you for the wage study and for keeping those competitive. Our software really helps us to keep technology advancing. We're able to return documents in 5 minutes. We have a property fraud alert that people are really becoming more aware of and appreciative for. We have Inspect, which allows us to index our documents with OCR technology, where the document is the item that's being indexed is read electronically, and we have better accuracy and better speed with that. We have Condor, which is a backup. Should we become behind in our indexing, Condor is our backup system. We can pay a group at Fiddler Technologies to index those documents. Should we fall behind, should we become short-staffed, something should happen like that. We have, coming soon is Laredo Connect. I'm very excited. That's the next innovation, so to speak. Laredo is our subscription service that we have for our title companies and our attorneys that choose to pay for a monthly subscription to our documents. We have about 25 to 30 Laredo customers, and this will be an invoicing service, automatically done. The customer will go in and pay for those with their credit card online. We won't have to touch those payments, which will really, and we won't have to keep track of those late payments, which is is quite a job for our administrative assistants in the office to make sure those are paid on time and make sure. So that will cut out that extra work that we're doing. So I'm excited for that. We were told about it last year, but they had some hiccups in the system. And so hopefully by the end of the year, early next year, we should have that up and running for us. So our revenues, like I said, 2021 was our big year. We had about 1.8 million come in. I'm projecting about 1.5 million this year. And then just to be conservative, don't know what the market's going to do next year. I have about 1.376 million. Our budget, like I said, is pretty much a flat budget except for the personnel expenses. It actually might have gone down a little bit on that. And thankfully, we have a technology fund that takes over a large burden of our expenses, our microfilm, our software, our printers, microfilm scanners, things like that, pay for a lot of that. We bring in about $200,000 per year in the technology fund, and excess funds can be turned over to the Land Records Fund to be used in other county offices, mainly the Appraiser's office. Public Works also use that. I've turned over 1.1 million since 2013. And we also have revenues that come in to the technology fund for Laredo, which is that subscription service, a Tapestry, which is a pay-per-use service. We also have Monarch, which is a streaming service of our documents that we have 3 customers that use that. And that brings in about 35,000. So that almost pays for our software for the entire year. And that is about it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for Becky? Commissioner Rickland.
You're converting a lot of the microfilm to digital, is that right?
We did 2.6 million images, so almost all of our images are already converted. I actually do realize the other day that we did not convert our military discharge document, so that will be my next project, is to convert those. We had an instance where a customer came in requesting their military discharge, and we had a problem with the computer and the scanner, and it took quite a while to get it printed for that individual. So I'm going to get those converted also.
Are we required to keep all the microfilm, or do you like keeping it as a backup, or?
Yeah, it's a backup. I believe the statute says that we are required to keep a hard copy, so that's our hard copy. We keep it off-site also. Actually, we keep them all off-site now. I was making 2 copies, one for the office, one for off-site, but I realized that was a waste. We just keep it off-site at a storage facility in case our digital backup should go out. We should lose that for some reason, which I don't see that happening, but we just like to be redundant because we have to make sure we always keep those forever into eternity. So,
Were we able to take those digital images and put them accessible to people on the internet, so that as part of the appraiser's office, I can go over to his website and get all kinds of information on real estate? Is there any way that we might be able to take some of those digital images where I would be able to do like the history, looking at my house and seeing who had the different deeds and titles?
right now, that's a paid service. You can come into the office and search for free, but if you want to search on the internet, you pay for that. So that's how we have it set up now, in order to keep that going. We have talked with the appraiser's office and IT about possibly having at least that last deed of record connected to the appraiser's site, so they can click on that and at least see that last one. But they wouldn't. Right now, they'd have to pay per search to do that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Steve Bauman, County Appraiser, and I do appreciate the opportunity to present our budget request to you today. Briefly, our office is responsible for discovering, listing, and appraising over 76,000 parcels of real estate annually as of January 1st, and all taxable personal property. The appraised value that we try to obtain is what a property should be able to sell for in the open market as of January 1st. And that's important because we need those values to be accurate in order to assure that the distribution of the tax base, total tax base, is done fairly. So it's a job that we don't take lightly. We have a total staff of 24 very experienced people. This includes the GIS department, which serves the needs of the county overall, as well as all of our needs. And this is something that I want to bring to your attention because you will not see it in our budget request. And thanks to Becky Neosi and the Register of Deeds office, these items are not funded by tax dollars, but through the Register of Deeds Land Records Fund. So about $100,000 is coming from her fund instead of appearing in my budget. She started the procedure where we can pre-budget these items, so I know it's safe to not include them in my budget request. Just briefly, the ESRI annual maintenance, it's a big ticket item, but it's not only used heavily by us, but by everybody. And in fact, everybody that hits our website searching for maps and things like that use it as well. A lot of departments are very dependent upon that. We have sketching software, our SideGen scanning software, Adobe license, Verizon data plans, and our orthophotography that we get every other year. So these things have all created large efficiencies for our office, and allows us to do a much better job more efficiently. At a glance, you can see that we are very personnel dependent in our budget. About 95% of that, our budget request is all in personnel. To the line items, the only increase you're going to see in our budget is due to the wage study, and I too would like to thank you all for that consideration. I know our staff appreciates it, and I think we were able to retain a couple people because of it. I will note that there is a $23,238 retirement contribution line. I'm not including that in my budget, and I would suggest that we can strike that from the total. We've had a commercial appraiser position open for several months that is going to allow us to be able to fund that with our 2022 excess. While we do have a very experienced staff, there are a lot of people that are getting close to retirement, but I don't foresee any in the next year. So we do have a solid fund to begin with, so everyone would have to retire in order for us to deplete it.
It's not a good idea.
No. Yeah, if that happens, we've got bigger problems. Then contractual services, the total is unchanged. I moved around the telephone line item because we increased the telephone line item because we went to predominantly telephone hearings, and that seemed to have increased our phone usage. And our insurance premiums weren't as much as I was expecting them to be with our lease vehicle program. And then the supplies remained unchanged. And then this is the summary for the totals. You can see that all of our increases in wage, total increase percentage is 5.88%. And I'm supposed to bring up our CIP program, and we have our leased vehicles under this category. This is funded through land records, but these are our requests, and the vehicles have been working out pretty well. I know that our fleet manager over in the Parks and Rec department are trying to sell our trucks as soon as we're able to get new ones, because it's more beneficial to the county. So as soon as that happens, we will have newer vehicles, and it sounds like lower payments. But and really, that's all I have. Be happy to try and answer any questions.
Questions?
You guys put a lot of miles on these vehicles, but burning up a lot of gas. I noticed your gas didn't go up any on your budget.
No, and you know, that's dependent upon the areas that we are needing to review every year. So we have to physically review every property at least once every 6 years. So we're driving around a lot, but a lot of those miles are in the city, and we don't put a lot of miles on it. I think they would hit us harder for hours used as opposed to mileage driven. So it's not as much as what you would think, but our gas line, fuel line, it dropped a little bit because we went to much more efficient vehicles. We were driving around in the sheriff's old cars that, you know, we don't need to run anybody down. So our fuel efficiency has increased considerably.
We have to run from people.
Yeah, you might need to get away.
Steve, how many appeals did your office field this year?
1,882.
Okay. And what was the amount that wound up getting changed? Did you keep track?
Yeah, we do. It was, I think 39, 40%, 70, or 750, I believe.
Decreased?
That decreased in
Okay.
some, well, that changed in some way.
All right.
Now, those were adjustments. Some of those,
I didn't know if people called to appeal and wound up getting a higher tax bill.
if they request it,
Oh,
we'll review it, and if they ask that their value be increased, we'll review it to make sure that it's the proper thing to do, and we can adjust it up if they request. It's a internal procedure that we do not increase someone's appraised value because they appealed if they're wanting it lowered. If they take that on to the next level might increase it, but we won't do that in our office. We'll fix it the following year. We don't want to scare people away from appealing.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. Mark Price, Interim Director of Information Technology. I assumed this role in March when Pat Oplander retired and had some pretty big shoes to fill, and I'm still trying to get my feet underneath me. In IT, we do support almost every, well, we do support every county department, from the sheriff's office, jail, down to the registered deeds and appraiser's office, as they have pointed out. I know the request was for a flat budget. I did my best to be conservative where I could, but unfortunately, you're gonna see I don't have a flat budget. The requested amount I have this year is $4,037,490. You'll see that is a $424,000.34 increase from our prior year. And I'll go over kind of what caused that increase in our budget from last year to this year. First off, we did have, as everyone has, an increase in our salaries due to the wage study. It doesn't look really bad because it's only a $57,000 difference, but that's taking into account a retirement transfer we did last year of $78,000. We had 3 senior employees retire in the last 6 months of this year. Well, I guess between last year and this year, we had our deputy director, our IT director, and then a app developer 3 who retired, and they had all been at the county 20 years plus, except for our app developer who'd been here 15 years. So that was 3 big retirements we had, and with the director leaving, we've been waiting to refill those, but they're positions we do need. We need a little restructuring, I believe, to address some gaps we have in our department, and we'll be hoping to find ways to get all the positions filled and back to 100% operating staffing for helping out the departments. Then we have our contractual services, which are, again, here you'll see a large increase. The main places where that is coming up as an increase is we added some software last year. For security, we added a 2-factor authentication provider, and then we also added a new security vendor. Those were two big software purchases that both we've seen some really good things from, especially the security vendor. It is being monitored 24/7, 365 days a year, and we'll see and get reports when we come in the morning of someone in a 24-hour location that has clicked on email inadvertently or gone to a website that was something you didn't want, and they will go in, they remediate the situation, correct the problem, so we don't have a rogue system on our network starting at 3 o'clock when they did something and until someone gets woken up by a call or comes in the morning and sees that there's a problem, they're getting taken care of immediately. So it's putting us into a lot better security structure. The other 2 were kind of minor, or the other increases. I did a small increase for travel and accommodations, just with cost of everything going up. That was one we were seeing an increase in. And then also our membership dues and subscriptions, we saw a increase in and that one was due to some subscription services our developers use. They are just increasing in cost. One of them, I think, went up almost $2,000 over previous years just because everything's going up in cost. Then our next line item was our supplies. There was a pretty small one increase here. Over the past probably 6 years, when we moved to our new phone system, we had been buying refurbished handsets. Those handsets are no longer available, so I'm projecting we'll have to be buying new handsets, not the refurbished ones, which refurbished ones were about $100 a piece. The new ones are going to be about $250 a piece. It's not something we have to always buy, just as when a handset goes out or a phone goes bad, we have to buy a replacement. Then another big increase in our budget, and this was at Betty's request. This was an item that had been in capital outlay for the past, I think, 3 years. It's for our Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure. We moved this into our actual capital assets. Kind of the story behind that is we had a virtualization system that when we bought it was $1.5 million. It had a useful life of about 5 years, unfortunately. When it came time to replace that, we started doing an evaluation and came to this Nutanix hyperconverged infrastructure. again, Nutanix actually has about a 5-year useful life when we buy it. What this is allowing us to do is, instead of the every 5 years buying a $1.5 million system, we're able to do these smaller increments, so $165,000 a year. As the old system ages out, we'll be able to put the new ones in, migrate systems over without the big forklift upgrades. If we would have stuck with the old way where we do the forklift upgrades and amortize it out over 5 years, it was gonna be $300,000 a year. So even though this seems like we're making more purchases, we have a cost savings because we're doing this every year and on a more efficient, lower cost system.
Mark, if I might
Yes.
mention something on that, because this was at my request. In the past, we'd had, like he said, when we were buying hardware or something like that, of course, it was a CIP item. But now we're really moving on to, it's not so much of a hardware as it's a yearly subscription type, not a subscription, but it's a yearly increase to storage, a yearly increase. It's more of a maintenance or an operational item. To me, it's more of an operational item than it is to a capital item. So that was my request to move it to the budget. I think it fits within the budget parameters better than it does a capital item.
Okay.
Okay. And now onto our capital items. The first one I added this year is fiber to different county buildings. Something I would really like to start doing is get more independence of fiber from other vendors having to pay monthly charges or being restricted by fiber that someone else owns. These two projects are two-phase, and it's to get dedicated fiber to the J.P. Lewis building, and then it would actually extend on to Gage Park. Part of the extending on to Gage Park would allow us to do a loop through the fiber we're putting down the 12th Street project. We are limited. We have fiber to the health building right now, but it's not dark fiber, so we're limited on what we can put across it, how much bandwidth we have. By putting in dark fiber would really change the way we do business there. The public Wi-Fi, we're actually having to pay for another service to provide public Wi-Fi in that building. They're only allowed one VLAN, so if we try to separate traffic or do anything for security, we're limited because we only have that one connection. This would allow us to change that. It would allow us to do a lot of possible changes at Gage Park. One of the things, and I've talked with some departments about, is trying to be more public facing and or not public facing, but have like public Wi-Fi at the park. To do it now, we would have to get a whole new connection there and have a monthly service for the connection. This would allow us to do it within the network we have. And going through with parks, one thing I would like to do as director, if I were to get it, is start looking at some community involvements we could do and putting out Wi-Fi in areas where it's going to benefit the parks, benefit the public. And on that note, these are in here. I'm actually going to be attending the same summit that Kurt Niehaus is attending tomorrow, the Kansas Infrastructure Summit. And part of that discussion there is broadband, cybersecurity, ways to get funding for this outside of the regular budget. I'm hoping there's some opportunities there. There's a lot of discussion in IT now of using these bills and grants to start providing bandwidth to the public, providing bandwidth to underserved, and I think this falls into that area. I'm hoping there's other ways to do it other than capital improvement, but I think it's something that we do need to look at, of getting more county-owned fiber that would benefit and allow us to move forward. Then the final capital improvement item I have is for network switch replacements. This is just kind of a replacement we're doing every so often, trying to keep older switches out of failure rates so we can get a new equipment in before something fails. We've gone through this last few years with switches, and that's what these two items are. And I guess I would stand for any questions you might have.
Mark, on the dark fiber piece, How much fiber do we own right now?
I don't know the exact amount of fiber. We have quite a bit of fiber on Lake Shawnee. We have some smaller runs to different county locations, mostly Parks and Rec locations. We have like elections office, we have dark fiber, which is a mashup of county-owned fiber with city-owned fiber.
Running down the Landon Trail.
No, that one actually, that runs on city that is not running. Landon Trail fiber is state of Kansas. I could come back with a report of where all we have fiber. One thing I had discussed with Kurt actually is when they do the Rochester Road project, having him bury a fiber there because to get the North Community Center on dark fiber. When they're tearing up the roads and they're putting down sidewalks, we can bury a conduit at the same time, and it's pennies on the dollar for what it would cost if we just went and tried to put a fiber up to 46th Street.
I think that's a good idea.
And with the number of things that are at 46th Street between Public Works, Solid Waste, Parks and Rec, that's one that would benefit. But I think if we were to go and try to do it without another project, it would probably be at least $250,000, if not $300,000 to $400,000 project. And I think with Public Works help, we can do it for not pennies on the dollar, but much less than that.
So when we put those in, I mean, that's a pretty long run, right, from Highway 24 up to, I mean, is that accessible to other companies? Can they pay us to use that fiber as well?
I think that'd be a discussion we need to have with Jim Crowell. I know other jurisdictions have done projects like this, and whether they do leases or access rights to other companies. I know I think it was Garden City did a fiber project at the beginning of COVID where they actually partnered with a provider and the provider wanted to get fiber throughout the city, so they put fiber in, and the city got a lease, like a 100-year lease or on a portion of the fiber, so they'd have the access to the fiber. It was actually owned by the local telecom, but now they're not paying that monthly service charge and maintenance. So that there's a lot of things that other companies are doing or other governments are doing. I think there are options that I've been looking into and trying to figure out what are ways we can do these things and reduce the cost to the county. I know we do not want to become a service provider, but I think there's always those opportunities for businesses for an economic reasons to get access to this, to where if we just help cover costs, I think it's something that'd be worth looking into.
Also don't want any 100-year leases on anything technology related.
Yeah. Well, and I think they've done those so that they bury the fiber, and instead of in 20 years having to go renegotiate what the access to the fiber is, it's basically you have that access as a partner.
Let's say fiber, we may not be using it 10 years down the road. So.
Like I say, it's about a 30 to 40-year life on the fiber.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.